To begin measuring, place an elastic at the actual waist. Don't move it once you've placed it. Place another elastic below the waist. You will use this elastic to measure the half hip and full hip. First, measure the waist. Put the tape around the waist along the elastic. Pull it snug but not tight, keeping one finger underneath. For the half hip measure, lower the second elastic to the level specified on page 22. Measure this distance down from the side, making the elastic roughly parallel to the floor. Take the circumference as you would the waist, and note both measurements. For the full hip, lower the elastic to the fullest part of the hip. This is done by eye. Make the elastic parallel to the floor. Measure the distance from the waist to the elastic at the side. This is usually 8 to 9 inches, but can vary. Take the circumference. Next, we determine the tilt of the pelvis. Measure front length to floor by putting the end of the tape at the center front on the waist. Draw the tape down to the floor, making it roughly perpendicular to the floor. Take the side length to floor measure by putting the end of the tape on the waist elastic and draw the tape to the floor at the side. Measure back length to floor by putting the end of the tape on the elastic at center back and draw the tape to the floor. Before measuring the neck, establish the neckline by placing a chain or weighted tape around the neck. Adjust it so it sits at the base of the neck like a jewel neckline. Measure the neck inside where the chain sits. The measure here should be snug, not loose. Front bodice length is measured from the center front on the neck chain to the center front at the waist. Back bodice length is measured from the center back on the neck chain to the center back waist. Before taking the figure length and figure width measures, establish the bust points on the figure. Mark these with chalk. Measure the figure length diagonally from the center front on the neck chain to the bust point. Measure figure width horizontally, the distance between the bust points. Next, we measure cross front and cross back. This determines where the seams on the armholes will fall. For the cross front, look for where the pectoral muscles meet the arm. Measure this width as if the tape were a flat ruler. The common mistake here is to measure too wide. Measure the cross back between where the back muscles intersect the arms. Before measuring the shoulder, you need to find the shoulder joint. Place a finger on the shoulder and find the place where, when the arm is raised and lowered, the finger remains stationary. If the finger moves when the arm is raised, the shoulder measure will be too long. Find the shoulder joint and mark with chalk. Measure the shoulder length from the neck chain to the mark. Most women are 4.5 inches. Bust measure is next. This is taken differently than in other systems. Have the subject raise her arms, place the tape high and snug across the back, and have her lower her arms. Keep one end of the tape short and near a bust point. Wrap the tape around the bust, passing it over the marked bust points. This measurement comes up longer than in other systems. Note how the tape angles towards the bust points. Bodice side length is measured by first putting a ruler under the arm parallel with the floor, then have the subject relax. Measure from the top edge of the ruler to the waist elastic. Measure the armhole circumference, making the tape pass over the shoulder mark. It should be snug but not uncomfortable. To measure the end of shoulder, first make chalk marks below the elastic, 2 inches in front of and 2 inches behind the side seam. Put the end of the tape on the elastic on the front mark. Pull the tape to the shoulder mark and hold the tape. Then pull the tape down to the back mark on the elastic. For the sleeve measures, have the subject hold her arm out, bent at the elbow. Sleeve length starts at the shoulder mark and passes over the elbow. Note the elbow length. Sleeve length is then measured to the prominent bone in the wrist. Measure the bicep over the fullest part of the bicep. Elbow breadth is taken over the bent elbow. The wrist measure is taken over the prominent bone in the wrist.